Hey there everyone, this is Doug Marshall, aka Worldbuilders Inc. for those of you who follow my artistic endeavors. This is my first sort of art process video, and actually it serves a double function as both an art process video for those of you who follow my DeviantArt or Instagram or anywhere else I post my art, pretty much those only two, and it also functions as a critical part of my world literature ethnography project. So I'm going to try and make this as short as possible for the people who are coming from my lit class and watching this. I don't want them spending 2 hours of time listening to me drone on about drawing stuff. So unfortunately, you don't get the complete explanation. But today, I'm going to be showing you just a general's idea of how I draw planets. So I use a program called paint.net, which is sort of like if Photoshop and Microsoft Paint had a love child. It's not as advanced as Photoshop, but it is definitely quite useful, and I've managed with it for 2-3 years now. If you want to download the program, it's totally free. You get it at www.getpaint.net. Not just paint.net, because that takes you to an irrelevant site, and it is totally free and safe to download. So without further ado, let's get working. So for those of you who are unfamiliar with the drawing program at all, this is our canvas, a blank slate where you can just doodle whatever, and I'm currently using the toggle paintbrush toggle tool. So we're going to start with filling the black background. This is the fill tool. We're filling the background black, and that'll be our base because it's nice to see the contrast. What we're going to do next is we're going to add a layer. And something you all should consider is if you are working to a specific goal, it's good to develop a vision. So what I mean by that is get a good idea of what's going to go into this painting. So like planning sketch if necessary, and then you can take a picture or scan it in, and then you can work on top of that, like I did with my Dawn project. See, there's an example of the planning sketch overlaid with the work in progress painting of it. And it's okay if you go away from the plan. It doesn't have to be exact. I usually don't go with a plan at all. Most of the time I'm just doodling for the sake of doodling. But on occasion when I do have a good idea for a full composition, I'll do a planning sketch, or I'll just have a good idea in my mind. And that usually gets me pretty far. So for example, this Dawn work in progress. An alien hanging from a tree. There's a boat, and then these did make the cut of the final, but they aren't in this version. This creature over here did not. So it's okay to stray from the plan. And another thing I planned for from the very beginning was my Trappist 1 poster, which doubtless many of you have seen before. I had a pretty solid idea of what I wanted it to look like, with the mountains in the bottom, fading up to the black, with the planets and the spaceships flying around. Okay, so now we have our transparent layer on top of our black background. We're going to start with the shape of the planet itself. That is a circle select, an ellipse select. I'm holding the shift key so that I get a perfect circle, otherwise it just goes to a random ellipse. One thing you want to be careful of is to not run into the side, because then you get an unsightly line there. Now once you've got the ellipse all set up just as a circle, you can actually move this around and fiddle with it using what I call beta select, which is basically moving your selection, as opposed to alpha select, which moves the pixels themselves. And we do not want to close out of this selection. We need that. So what we're going to do here is we're going to pick colors for the continents. And Usually, like I said, I just draw for the hell of it, so I'll pick random colors. Today I'm kind of feeling orangey because I've been thinking about my friend's planet project, Freyr, which has orangey red flora. And I think probably up it to about 125. So this is your color tab. And you can fiddle around with the wheel here, or you can use the presets, or you can modify your color using this. Let's go back to 125. And you can also modify the opacity of the color. I'm not going to worry about that now. So let's go into our toggle paintbrush, up the brush width, the amount of pixels that each blot covers. Let's move it up to about 30. Keep the hardness at 75, and I'll explain hardness in a minute. So now we're just going to sort of doodle out random continents here. For some reason I like this aesthetic of the continent coming over the northwestern hemisphere. That usually features a lot in my planets for some reason. Yeah, I think that's pretty good. And something to consider while you are working on your continent drawing here is to consider tectonics, plate tectonics. Now, I know that sounds like just a boring thing you learned in high school science class, but trust me, actually, tectonics is quite important if you want your planet to have life, at least Earth-like life, because what tectonics does is, on top of moving around climatic patterns over time, it also moves biology around. So what I'm trying to say here is when you have continents colliding, like say these continents up here, you have new life forms from this continent and this continent meeting each other, and there's another case of survival of the fittest, seeing which ones make it and which ones don't. And tectonics are also a critical sign of a geologically active planet. And what I mean by that is you've got a warm, spinning interior core which provides the magnetosphere. And a magnetosphere is a giant magnetic field around a planet that protects us from the radiation of outer space so that we don't die immediately. Okay, so now we've got a pretty good idea of what we want our continents looking like here. I'm just going to sort of play around here, make random shapes. And it can be whatever you really want. You don't have to stick to tectonics necessarily. It's just a good thing to consider. Especially if you're a hardcore world builder like me, where science and realism is the law of the land. Now, you don't necessarily have to stick to science and reason. I mean, space art is, for the most part, drawn because you like looking at space. So it's okay to exert some artistic liberty. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to decide on what other biomes we want in this planet. I'm going to take my color picker tool and set my secondary color as well as my primary color. And now what we're going to do is, let's go darker for the forests. Let's go much lighter and probably a little grayer for deserts. Yeah, there we go. So now I'm going to take my recolor tool, which recolors whatever color you click it on. And I'm going to turn the hardness way down so that it blends better. So when you're doing your biomes, what you want to consider as well is your climate patterns. And climate patterns can be pretty generally predicted from geological features like continent arrangement and the axis of the planet. So usually when I draw planets, I draw them with a regular north-south orientation. So if you'll give me 1 second. Up this way is north, and this way is south. So we'll probably have some coastal forests here, maybe some desert along the equator over here. There we go. Desert. Maybe there's a mountain range here. Mountain range over here that puts all the moisture down there. Let's have some more forests. And you don't need to worry about being super specific on this, because, oh my, that's an unsightly pinkish color. What we're going to do next is, now that we've got our continents, our basic shapes, we're going to go into the Effects tab, use our distortion, and we're going to crystallize it. And I'm going to up the cell size so that we get a more satisfactorily random setup. Let's take it down a bit from here. Oh, I like this. This is good. Okay. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to take my paintbrush again, and I'm just going to, actually I'm going to up the hardness. I'm going to repair the edge along here so that we don't have any mishaps later. Something I should mention as well is, if you have a hard time getting inspiration, I find a lot of inspiration in music. And I like to have music playing while I am working, whether it's on schoolwork or on drawing. So right now I actually have some Linkin Park instrumentals going on here. But it can be whatever music you want. If you just find some music that you really like and delve deep into it and find some inspiration. Okay. Now what we're going to do is we're going to repeat crystallize again. And this time we're going to make the fragments, the cells, even smaller. I think I like that. Okay, there we go. We're going to repair the edge again. What you want to do, well, why you repair the edge is mainly because you don't want you don't want your planet looking like it's flat, right? Say no to flat Earth, kids. Because you do want to get that effect of the continent going over the horizon. I think I'm going to recolor this right here, or maybe not. I think I'll leave it. Okay. Let's redo the crystallization one more time, and then we're going to go into dense. Cell size, let's diminish the cell size. Actually, you know what? We don't even need to do that because it's basically a less sophisticated effect as the dents. So I don't have my sticky note on me, which has the essentials on it, but I do have a general procedure. So we're going to maximize the scale on the dent effect, and then we're going to up the roughness to probably about 50 something. Going to lower the refraction. Also going to lower the scale a bit now that I think about it, and we can fiddle around with that later. Lower the tension. Up the quality. The quality really doesn't matter right now, but it's just a little bit of comfort. Okay, so as you can see, this effect produces a more ragged and more natural looking coastline. I actually quite like that right here. Because when you think about it, coastlines aren't straight lines for miles, right? Now, they're jagged and ragged and unpleasant to look at. Well, actually, quite pleasant to look at if you were me. But they look much more natural now. And now we're going to repair the edge again. I'm going to use my color picker to get that color back. And what I like about this, even though it takes a little while, is it's sort of a zen feeling. It's almost like if you ever tended to a zen rock garden, one of those, I don't know, it could be small, it could be big. And it just sort of feels like you're tending your own world, you're shaping it to your whim, and that's a feeling I like a lot. And that's why I'm a world builder. World Builders Inc. is not only my screen name, it is pretty much a part of my personality. Okay, so now that we have our continents looking pretty spiffy, what we're going to do now is we're going to add another layer. We're going to move that below the continent layer, and we're going to start working on the seabed. So this is a tedious procedure, but what we're going to do is we're going to make it look topographical. So we have this nice light color as our primary color, and as our secondary color we're going to take a very darker blue like that. I think I'll make this just a little bit lighter. And now we're going to trace the coastline. And actually, I'm going to decrease the hardness a bit. Let's put it at 15. That's good. And see, the hardness affects how the color blends into its background. Also, I apologize if you can hear my computer's fan or any background noise. Not much I can do about that, considering that my headphone mic does not work at the moment for whatever reason. It's unpleasant, but unfortunately, you'll have to deal with this until I get better equipment, if I ever do at all. So I'm going to try and speed this process up just a little bit, because this is one of the most tedious parts of drawing a planet, is all the coastline detail that you have to go through. It's rather menial, but at the same time, I find this menial work to be quite relaxing, because it's nice to just follow the lines. And again, I sort of apologize for my silence. All right, there we go. So now we have a coastline. What we're going to do now is we're going to uncheck this layer. So it's invisible, but it's still there. We're not deleting it. Not deleting it. Just unchecking it. And now we're going to fill in this whatever's behind these lines, so that when we go to do our distort effect once more later, we don't have a crisis of blank spots, unsightly blank spots. They don't have to be perfectly filled. That's just a sort of an OCD, obsessive thing of mine. You might want to check back on that. So we want to fill this here, but we do not want to fill this. Okay. So now that we have our continental shelf here, our coastline outlined in our lightest color, what we're going to do is we're going to add another layer, move it below this one, and we're going to make this color a little darker here. And we're going to, let's compare that. I think we can go darker. You want to get to the balance where it's dark enough that it's noticeable, but it's not dark enough that it's jarringly dark. I think that's good. So we're going to do the same thing we did with the coastline and the continents, except what we're going to do here is we're just going to outline our continental shelf. And again, kind of menial work, so this takes up most of the time. So you can see our ocean here is quickly getting filled up. And it's starting to look more like a topographical map, isn't it? And that's the idea. Okay, we have that layer done. Let's do the same thing we did with our continents and coastline. We're just going to make sure that nothing too drastic happens when we go to edit our distortion later. And now I could continue and add a bunch more layers to this topography. I think I'll only just add one more, and then we'll get to the base. Yeah, okay. So now that we have our... Oop, me oh my, what have I done? Ah, there we go. Alrighty. So let's add another layer. Move it below our second topography layer. Let's go with hell. Okay. Yes, let's go with our secondary color. So now I'm right-clicking instead of left-clicking, and that's our secondary color. Alrighty, so now for our last layer, and I've just decided that we're going to make a shortcut, so we don't have to worry about filling that in. So our last layer, we're going to darken this even further, about 109. We can go darker, 70. That's perfectly dark. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take the paint bucket fill, and we're going to fill the selection. I think we can go a little lighter now. That's good. Oh, there we go. Okay, so now that looks appropriately topographical. So what we're going to do here is I'm going to go back up to my coastline, so reselect that layer, and I'm going to merge that down with our other two topographical layers, and I'm going to repeat the dents. Whoa. Okay. So now I've got what looks like a very convincing topographical. I keep hitting Control X instead of Control Z. Control Z is undo, Control Y is redo. Just in case you're confused about how I was undoing and redoing. Let's go into our distortions, dents, and I think I'm actually going to lower the scale a bit. And actually, you can always hit reseed until you find something that's more appropriate to what you're trying to do. Something I don't like about this this effect property is that it moves everything up just a little bit, so it's a little off kilter. I'm going to reset the scale value to its default. Let's go with that. Okay, now that we have our, oh my, what's that there? A problem, that's what it is. Not anymore. Alright, so now we're going to do what I usually save until last, which is save it. So I'm just going to call this tutorial world and save it as a PDN file, paint.net file, which preserves all your layers, does not flatten the image. And I'm saving it in my pictures. There we go. And we won't lose any of our work. Control S is save, by the way. That's how I got that save file up. Okay. We're going to skip two of the stages that take a long time, which is the cloud and the city lights layers, because one, I don't really have a master technique for clouds yet. I'm still working on that. And the city lights take a very, very long time, one of the longest steps in this whole process. So we're going to skip those. I can probably cover that again in a later video. Okay, our next step is, now we're getting to the fun stuff. So now we've added our layer on top of everything. We're going to reset our palette, and I'm going to take the white secondary. I'm going to turn the opacity all the way down so it's totally transparent. And now what we're going to do is we're going to take the gradient tool to radial ellipse, radial gradient, and I hit the F key by accident. Now that we're back on our gradient, this tool allows you to accomplish large patches of shading, short amount of time. So I'm actually right-clicking right now, which inverts the colors. And I think the planet's equator is right about here, so the sun will rise across that way. And there we have it. There's our round planetary shading here. I quite like that. So round planetary shading. So that's a pretty simple step. Now we're going to, I'm going to deselect and make sure that doesn't happen. Okay. Let's just extend this selection by a single pixel so that it blends better into the background. And now we're going to add a new layer. And I'm going to swap my colors, go to primary. I'm going to turn up the opacity to about there. I'm going to make it a little more blue because this step is the atmosphere. What we're going to do here is I'm going to increase this just a little bit. Increase our selection with beta select. Move it a little bit so that we get a nice effect when we go into our shapes tool. Select an ellipse. And now we have just the outline, which is good. Let's make my brush width a little bit lower. Probably 5. 5 will do. And now I'm going to give us an ellipse here. I was holding shift to make it a perfect circle. Tone blue there. And holding shift, we're going to go this way. And now I'm going to using alpha select, I'm going to tilt this just a little bit so that it matches, so that the atmosphere matches our shadow better. There we go. And now we're actually going to deselect, and we're going to blur using the Gaussian blur the atmosphere. About a 3 radius should be good for our start. Possibly repeat that blur. No. Now we're going to go into photo, glow, increase the brightness, decrease the contrast so it clears blue, increase the radius a little bit. Repeat the glow again. We have a nice glowing blue nitrogen, oxygen, water vapor atmosphere. So our last step here is going to add another layer and drag it all the way to the bottom, just above the background. And now I'm going to get my primary palette back, switch the colors so that white is my primary, go into my paintbrush tool, decrease the brush width a little bit, and we're going to add some stars. This is sort of an optional thing. I happen to like adding stars because it brings pop to a rather otherwise plain background. Let's do a random scattering. And of course, different size stars are essential because not all stars are the same apparent magnitude, same distance from Earth or any planet. It's just a simple smattering of stars. And now we're going to repeat the glow. Make sure it's having some effect. Let's go into photo, glow, maximize the radius and maximize the contrast. That's better. I'm going to repeat that again. There we go. Now we're getting somewhere. Our stars are starting to glow. One more time. There we go. There's some nice glowing stars. And there you have it. So let's save our product. And this is saved as a PDN file currently. So what we're going to do now is go to File, Save As. We're going to change the file type to PNG or JPEG, whichever you prefer. Save it. It's going to bring you a save configuration. That's okay. And it's going to ask you to flatten. You want to flatten. And there you go. There's our planet, our red and blue marble. I hope you've enjoyed this, and hope this gets me good credit. Anyways, I think I'll do a full explanation of this program next. In the meantime, well, goodbye.